All right, checking YouTube audio, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, hey. All right, checking YouTube audio, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, hey.
I'm like a 7. If I was able to get up when I want adjust it, so it'll turn green.
All right.
And when you're
Turn
done.
it. Oops.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Blake, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'll stay on mute until you're ready for me.
Do you have any ability to turn up your volume for your microphone a little bit, or are you maxed out?
Let me see. It does not seem to want to let me turn it up. Is it too low?
Okay, then we'll work on turning it up here. We just wanted to make sure if it was a volume issue on your end before we turned it up down over here.
I can try a different microphone if you want. Let me see.
I'll say that. I'll just say that.
Okay, how about that? Is that any better?
You're just a little quiet, so I'd ask that you do try to talk up as much as possible.
Is this any better with this microphone?
What was that?
No, I guess not. This microphone, is that any better?
It's kind of muffled.
All right, we'll go back to the original. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, try and talk louder.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Delafield Common Council meeting for January 20th, 2025. So on Martin Luther King Jr. Day and Inauguration Day, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Molly, roll call, please.
Sure thing. Alderperson Henry.
Here.
Alderperson Schaefer. Alderperson Valley.
Here.
Alderperson Wilkin.
Here.
Alderperson Price.
Here.
Alderperson Burke.
Here.
Alderperson Grimmer is excused this evening. Mayor Eicher.
Present.
Administrator Hafner.
Here.
Attorney Joe Worth is
Here.
also present.
Okay, item number 4, minutes. Looking for approval of December 16th regular Common Council meeting minutes.
We'll move to approve the minutes of our December 16th meeting.
Second. Any discussion or changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Abstentions?
I will abstain.
Danielle abstains. Okay, minutes are passed. Item number 5, City of Delafield citizens' comments. Is there any citizens here wishing to comment on anything on or off the agenda tonight? It looks like we have one. Let's get to press that bar on the bottom of that. Yeah, that one right there, the green light will go on. Yeah. No, press it. There you go. Thanks, Jim.
Wow. Technology. Good evening. I'm Jim Zahorik. I reside at 1948 West Shore Drive and have been a resident of this wonderful city for over 30 years. And people say, if you see something, say something, and that's why I'm here tonight. It's 2 safety issues that I don't know where to start the dialogue, and I think this is just an excellent place. Way back when we first moved here, it was like a Norman Rockwell painting when you went northbound on Genesee Street to where the little pond is, right next to the falls. And in the wintertime, you'd see people out there ice skating and just having a great time. But obviously, to have ice, it's cold, and it was thought it'd be great to have like a warming shelter. And there was a lot of discussion one way and the other, but thousands of dollars were spent for a wonderful shelter. And what I noticed recently, we have global warming, but right now we've got ice. And someone or a number of people thought it would be a great idea to go throw rocks onto that ice, which, as we speak, isn't a problem because currently I haven't noticed anyone out there skating. But if they do skate with young children that are not quite as adept or whatever, they could easily hit one of those rocks. They could also fall onto another rock. And so I don't know how we can address it, possibly with a little sign having to do with this is city property and we're damaging it. The same way as when people were throwing rocks into the river west of our bridge. And that was all done with a lot of effort and, again, expense, and compromised the ability to navigate that river by throwing rocks from the shoreline back in. That's number 1. Number 2, my wife and I, Mary, and I almost had a head-on collision on Milwaukee Street. We were westbound, coming into the downtown area, approaching Oneida. And what I noticed was a vehicle parked in the diagonal parking slots, but well into the eastbound lane. And I proceeded, and a car came around the corner off of Genesee, now eastbound towards me, and there's no way that the two of us are going to get past that vehicle that was sticking out. But all that vehicle did was come into my lane. I hit the brakes. An accident was avoided, but in my heart I thought, wait, if this happened to me, it could happen to anybody else. So parked the vehicle, happened to have a tape measure, and it was an extended cab truck parked in that diagonal section, and the corner of the truck was 7 feet 9 inches from the center line of the road. Those diagonal lines where you park in between those diagonal lines, the end of those lines are 12 feet from the center of the road. What can be done? I'm sure the last thing that people want to think about is converting the diagonal parking to parallel parking, just like it is on the north side of Milwaukee. And it just so happens that those parallel parking spots, there is a line defining where you can be away from the curb. Just so happens to be 12 feet. The same as the distance from the diagonal line from the center line, 12 feet. And the last two parking spots eastbound on Milwaukee have a sign that says something to the effect of no SUV/van or truck parking. Now, those two signs were put up, I talked to one of the business owners, because of vision. When you come off of Oneida, if they're parked on the corner, you can't see the traffic coming that way. I'm not suggesting that. I'm really saying that we are prohibiting van or truck parking on those two slots, and what could occur is I don't know where I came from, but I can't talk without my hands. I apologize. But if this is your diagonal slot, just another line painted on the pavement that is parallel to the curb with a sign. If your vehicle proceeds beyond, or when you park your vehicle, if it's beyond that, you're not the right of way, but you're in a traffic lane. Please move your vehicle. Or however, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your attention. It's cold out there, and you all drive safely. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Any other citizens wish to comment this evening? Okay, seeing none, citizens' comments are now closed. Next up is special orders of business. First, 6A, presentation by Blake Thiessen, PLA, with architecture and planning regarding the conceptual design for the potential stage at Liberty Park, followed by discussion and possible action. He's going to be presenting via Zoom. So unless someone else has something to add to introduce him, I'll let him go. You're up, Blake.
Great, thank you. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but first of all, thank you for having me in. It's been a fun process to get to this point here, working through the concepts. So I'm going to just pull up my documents. All right, hopefully you can all see that on my screen. So just a quick overview here. The genesis of this project was to look at options for building a more permanent structure for the performances in the park that would replace the temporary stage that is brought in each summer. And so in general, the footprint would stay about the same. We did study various sizes, comparing a smaller scale stage. For what it's worth, the orange box in these concentric shapes is your existing temp stage footprint. And so What we heard is that size seems to work very well with all the different acts that you bring in. And so we modeled that as kind of our baseline, but we did look at slightly smaller and slightly larger footprints throughout the process. We looked with the group at several other stages around the state of different styles and sizes, just so we had an understanding of kind of the design direction that we were going to pursue. And ultimately, what we heard is that the example from the community of Two Rivers seemed to have a lot of the boxes checked. So that was one of the design inspirations that we took. In general, we heard that natural materials such as stone and wood and the curved roof, whether it be curved this way or curved front to back, was preferred. And so that's ultimately what ended up in our model. And so as we dove into the process, we looked at the massing, and I'm not going to get into the other options that we studied. If you want to see them, I have them in kind of a backslide here, but this was the ultimate style that we ended up with some masonry columns on the front, a masonry rear wall to help provide a backdrop for both acoustics and protection of the performers. But we felt that it was too heavy with a solid masonry wall, and so we looked at some laser cut metal panels to help give a little bit of artistic flair to the back wall, allow for light and air to move through the space. And so what we're seeing here is two different options. This is 5 metal panels. This one we went 4 with a solid panel in the middle, which could be used for naming rights or some sort of logo opportunity here in the middle. But the nice thing is this allows for integration of some artistic expression. And one of the things that we talked about with the group was maybe engaging with the high school tech ed or shop class to help design these, or a local artist who can maybe find some patterning that speaks to the flavor of the park and the community. One thing to note that you'll see on the front here, we are showing 2 elevated steps. We wanted to make sure that we had the stage elevation approximately the same height above existing grade that your temporary stage provides, to give the performers an advantage of being elevated above the spectators. And so we've settled on the magic number of 2 steps, and so we would mound up the footprint and then have 2 concrete steps coming down, which allows for, again, another element of protection to the performers, so that you can't have patrons just rush the stage without any vertical obstruction. On the back side, however, the stage would be elevated about 3 feet, and so this wall that stands at about 4 feet tall on the front side is actually about 6.5 feet vertical on the rear. And so if you have performers behind the stage, either getting gear ready or other things, they would be screened from view from the front. We did elect to focus on a curved roof from side to side. It seemed to fit the space better and the material palette that we were looking at. One thing to note here on this front arched beam, we would look at putting some basic stage lighting behind it, and so that on a smaller performance day where you're not importing a big light system, you would still have some house lights to be able to illuminate the stage and the performers. So the stone masonry here was drawn from inspiration from the surrounding buildings in the community, namely St. John, which is in the backdrop, of course, of the stage. So as a patron, you're looking at the stage and you would see that material in the background as it stands today, and so this would all blend in. Now, I think in your packet you will see that we also studied an alternate material type, which picks up on the sort of the round granite cobblestone from the fish hatchery and the bridge abutments. And so we did render it with this material palette as well, so you can see how that might blend in. But actually, while I'm on this slide, this is a fairly good opportunity to see how the front steps work, and then it blends in on the grade on the sides and the rear. So again, on that back side, you have a little bit of extra vertical separation between your performers and the front of house. So let me go back here to the original with the limestone or the limestone. I'll just flip through here. Overall size on the rear roof, we were at about 30, and the side is 26. So if you remember, your existing stage was 24 by 32, so it's very, very close. Your front roof is 40, so it flares out a little bit. So the average is very, very close to your existing stage geometry. One thing that we do on a lot of our stage projects is we will have a ring of colored concrete around the full perimeter, especially when there is a grade change. And that helps performers know when they're starting to approach that grade break. Plus it adds a little bit of breakup and interest in the ground plane. So I'll flip through some of these renderings here. Again, this is the original model with the land and stone masonry. Here you can see St. John's in the background. So here, this is a good shot of the rear, and actually we've modeled it a little bit further since, so there'd be another 1.5 foot of drop here in the back. So, again, the concept there was to give a little bit of privacy for the performers when they're backstage. So an aerial view, you can start to see the bridge here in the background with the river, crossing over to the hatchery area. If you've been out in the site, you know that there's a small pocket of kind of spongy turf area, and that's represented here. So we're quite a ways away from that. No disturbance would be present into that area. We would maintain that existing tree line. So just another shot. Now you can start to see how that ceiling would be some sort of stained tongue and groove wood to help acoustics. Now you can see that curved beam where the lights would be hidden. View looking out. View looking back. And a bigger bird's eye here as you zoom out. So I can flip back over to the alternate model with the granite. If you want to see, we took a lot of those same shots for comparison. So I think from an aesthetics point, they both certainly work. It comes down to, I think, your preference. Plan Commission did approve the land and stone, but I think one of the requests that we heard out of that was to explore this alternate option. So bringing that to you tonight here for some feedback. I'll pause. Tom, maybe you have any comments that I might have missed?
No, I think you covered it pretty thoroughly. Thank you.
Okay.
Does anyone on the council have questions for the designer?
This looks awesome. The land and stone, I really like the idea of matching it with St. John's. Just as the person that's looking at the concert, you're going to be able to see both buildings or structures, and it looks really nice. My question for you, you mentioned some smaller stage lighting. Is there any plan to have any access to on-site speakers? Just thinking of like dance troupes or other smaller organizations that may not have access to that sort of equipment.
Yeah, great question, and thanks for the compliments on the aesthetic. Oftentimes what we'll do, in addition to the sort of the basic stage lighting, we will have some smaller speakers, sound system mounted on these front columns with an access panel on the back of the masonry, that front pier. It would be fairly simple systems. You want sort of your average user to be able to access it and use it. Obviously, when it's not in a performance mode, that is a locked box that someone from the city crew would have to come and unlock for a performance. But yeah, that's definitely something to explore. The steel columns on these are structural by nature, and they will take mounting of even some pretty good sized speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so and this this is a conceptual approval that we're looking for. The Plan Commission approved it. Just as if when money's available and this moves forward, we know what we're going to be going for when the ask is made. So looking for a motion perhaps to approve this.
Hey, Blake, just one more thing that I thought of. Do you want to share what the concept cost estimate is?
Yes, we did talk with several contractors in the area who, did some takeoffs on materials. And I want to say we were right in the 750 to 800 range, which was, two different estimates we got in. And that would include the structure, the concrete stage slab itself, and associated earthwork with that.
And we're being asked just to make a motion to approve moving forward with the design?
Just in concept that this is something we want to, we'll likely back if they get funding.
Okay. I will so move.
I will second.
Is there any discussion, comments?
I love it. Thank you. Brilliant work.
Thank you. I guess, can I ask for a clarification? Is there a preference on the Lannon versus the granite?
Lannon,
And there's two ways you can go about it. The council could make a decision now, or that could be a detail to be left to be sorted out at a later date.
Yeah, I think our mission at this point was to get a rough costing, to give the Arts Foundation tools they need to start looking for sponsorship and fundraising, and for us, in the city to say, yes, this type, this style, this size of stage facility is appropriate for that location. There's a lot of details, colors, design, etc., that can be worked out later.
Just one more thought too. If you look at it like Jacob did and wanted to be complementary with the stone of the St. John's building, we should keep in mind that it's possible in the future you won't see the St. John's building if they build condos in between the stage and the school buildings.
yeah, I get that. I just like the aesthetic of the Lannon stone, period. It's less reflective on whether or not I can see St. John's. So that's just a personal thing, and it isn't counting, so we're just giving the okay to move forward, right?
Yeah.
And we even have a second.
And I agree, but we can decide that later.
Yep.
But,
I have a design question. Is there any kind of storage built into this? I mean, he mentioned that, I thought you said something about a lockbox. Is there any kind of, I don't know, like built-in, anything like that?
Yeah, really good question. So in this version, no. One of the options that we explored and designed had sort of a back-of-house room where you could store tables and chairs and whatever you wanted to, or it could be a green room for the performers. At the end of the day, I think the group all decided that the massing just became too much, and it also drove the cost up quite a bit. So we elected to not integrate that into this design option. One of the other things I should have mentioned, that the beauty, or one of the beautiful things about this is that due to its open nature, it could also function as a picnic shelter when it's not in a performance mode, which, honestly is the majority of the time. So we maintained really nice open sight lines for security and flexibility of the space. So to answer your question directly, no, this one does not have any large-scale storage capacity.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Abstentions? Okay, we're past another group, so looking forward to Park and Rec and the Arts Foundation to get rolling.
Woohoo!
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Blake.
Have a good night.
Okay, now on to 6B, Metropolitan Builders Association of Greater Milwaukee appeal to the City of Delafield regarding the use of impact fees pursuant to Municipal Code Section 46.4D. Appellant's opportunity to address the council, followed by discussion and possible action. So we're familiar, we've talked briefly about this in our meeting earlier or later last year. They're here to present their appeal. We'll have, if we have any questions, please ask them. just raise your hand so I can call on you to ask the questions if we do have any at the end. And the goal here is to hear them out, and we can or cannot make a decision tonight. It's up to you whether you think you need more information or you want to digest what was just handed out and what they're going to present, which is binders of information. So
Yes, you have binders.
the pressure is not.
You're all very
The
excited.
pressure is not on. So the pressure's not on to make a decision tonight, but if you feel compelled that you've got what you need, go ahead, but otherwise we can wait until another meeting. So with that, go ahead and introduce yourselves with name and addresses, please.
Thank you. I'm attorney Edith Peterson. I'm with the law firm of Langer and Peterson. We are located at 155 East Capitol Drive in Heartland.
And I am Toby Van Sistine. I'm the Executive Officer for the Metropolitan Builders Association. We are located at 2120 Pewaukee Road in Suite 103 in Waukesha.
All right, thank you. And as much as possible, or actually, please speak into the microphone so we can capture all this.
Absolutely.
And people at home can hear.
I have a pretty loud voice, but I will do my best. And I usually do better standing, so if I stand, I apologize, or don't apologize, but it's not because I'm trying to be crazy, but that's how I'm used to talking to people. So as I said, I am Edith Peterson. I'm an attorney in Heartland. We practice here in Lake Country. We also practice in Jefferson County out of Watertown. We enjoy doing business here. Do a lot of business in Delafield, and for the most part, have had no issues in Delafield. I'm here today representing the Metropolitan Builders Association of Greater Milwaukee. Now, the Builders Association is a trade association, which is not for profit, and represents about 650 members involved in construction and remodeling in Waukesha, Washington, Jefferson, Ozaukee, and Milwaukee counties. Many of their members have operated here in the Delafield area. So as I said, we typically have no problems with Delafield. They're a good community, at least my firm has found to work with. But my client, MBA, you'll hear me call them MBA, it's just an anagram for them, has identified a problem. One that they've found here and also in other communities in Wisconsin. And actually, it's an issue that's going on throughout the country. And that's how municipalities are handling impact fees. Sure, you're all aware that MBA filed an appeal over a year ago regarding the city's use and collection of impact fees that are collected from builders and developers. Many of those people and companies are members of my client. Impact fees are fees that municipalities can charge developers and builders pursuant to state statute, that may only be used to pay for capital public facilities that are necessary to accommodate land development and that are identified by a needs assessment performed by a municipality and that are determined in that needs assessment to be necessary to accommodate new development. Now, a needs assessment is an analysis that's required by our statute that identifies the specific public improvements that are necessitated because of new development. My client believes that the city of Delafield has violated the required statutory process for the utilization and the imposition of impact fees. Since 2007, the city of Delafield has allocated accumulated impact fees of over $1 million to the undesignated surplus of the city's debt service fund to offset future debt service levies, rather than expending them for capital facilities that have been determined necessary to serve development. So the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund is that part of the fund that is not reserved for payment of any particular municipal debt. In Delafield, the city significantly changed the public facilities that it is charging impact fees for. since the creation of its last needs assessment, which was in the year 2000, so 25 years ago. And they've raised fees without creating a more current needs assessment as is required by Wisconsin law. These are the problems that we're here today to talk to you about and to hopefully find a resolution for. I'll be pointing out, making important points, I think, related to the appeal. You've got your documentation that I'm going to go through with you, and I'm going to apologize in advance if my presentation sounds like a dissertation, but the issue involves statutes and the intention of statutes and ordinances. And so I think it's important that y'all understand what the underlying law is that we're talking about today. So I am going to spend time talking about it. Why is my client here? Why are they spending resources on this appeal? Because the city's handling of impact fees doesn't only financially impact the members of MBA. In the larger scheme of things, communities' mishandling of impact fees has negatively impacted our country's current housing crisis. Things like impact fees and connection fees, along with other costs that municipalities impose on developers, like roads and sewers and water installations, have raised the cost of homes and have made the ability for people to move into the communities that they wish to move in more difficult and too costly. And it's not only a problem here, ladies and gentlemen, it is a problem throughout our state and our country. I first wanted to address the response that I had an opportunity to review to MBA's appeal that was written by Mr. Hafner, the city administrator. He prepared a couple of memorandums. One was in January of 2024, and then most recently with your materials that you should receive today on January 15th of this year. He states that the basis for MBA's appeal is incorrect because the monies collected for impact fees have been used to offset the cost of the city's construction projects. There are a number of problems with this assertion. First, the construction projects that Mr. Hafner is talking about were never the subject of a needs assessment that is required by statute when impact fees are amended in the amount that's charged or when the facilities for which they are imposed are changed. There's not been a demonstrated need in Delafield for the new facilities as being a result of development as required by Wisconsin law. Further, the city has allocated these funds in the city's books to the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund to offset future debt levies. This, ladies and gentlemen, as you'll learn tonight, is contrary to the impact fee statute. The idea behind impact fees is to be a source of funds to help cities deal with growth. They should be seen as kind of a savings account, or I guess a layaway plan, and be used only for those facilities that have been identified in a needs assessment as being needed because of growth in a community's population. As an example, paying for a jungle gym in a city park that is located in a new development, or expansion of a water distribution facility because that's necessary because of expansion of development. It's not supposed to be used as part of a buy-on-credit plan where the impact fees are used for paying off future debt. Funneling impact fees into the debt service fund to be used to pay on municipal debt in the future really requires residents to pay twice, if you think about it. Once when they get their building permit, and then again through property taxes that are used at least in part to pay off municipal debt. This isn't what the legislature intended, ladies and gentlemen. Allocating impact fees to the surplus fund to be held there to offset debt levies at some time in the future defeats the statutory requirement, in addition, that the fees be held in a separate, segregated, interest-bearing account for refund if it's necessary. This allocation to that debt service fund essentially removes impact fees from the city's books impact fee column, puts them into another column where they're not accounted for separately until they're spent and are not held for possible refund if not spent appropriately. The expenditure of impact fees on future debt payments and the collection of the new buildings, and the collection of impact fees based on the value of those new buildings, which were never identified in a needs assessment as being necessary to accommodate new development, you're going to learn tonight is simply a violation of the Wisconsin statutes. Because there's never been a determination made of what appropriate proportion, if any, of the new building's cost should be borne by developers, you're going to come to understand that impact fees should not have been applied to them and should not have been based on their values. And as I said, we're not talking about a small amount of money. City's analysis shows that since 2008, we're talking about over $1 million. And this is why my client and its members are so very concerned about this. So I have provided, each of you got your binders, that includes documentation that I believe supports Metropolitan Builders Association. I invite you to review these documents with me and try to follow along. I'll do my best to point to the tabs and the exhibits that I'm talking about. The first document in your binder is just a timeline. That's at tab 1. I do have a couple of blow-ups of some of the documents. I realize that they are not big enough for everyone
You're not
to
being
see.
captured by the microphone, and the reason that's important is because
realize
the reason we don't
they're-
have people here, it's
Gotcha.
recorded for, people are watching at home.
I apologize. I tend to walk around too, so I'll do my best to avoid that. The timeline is provided to you today just as kind of a quick synopsis of what's gone on in respect to impact fees and in respect to MBA's appeal and investigation for that appeal. Shows the timing of the enactment of the city's ordinance, the state statute in 1993, the completion of a needs assessment, and the approval of the city ordinance in February 2000 in the city of Delafield, approving the imposition of impact fees on developers and builders. It's just provided as a quick reference to show you the events that have surrounded this appeal and impact fees. Shows you that it was July 22nd of 2022 when MBA first requested information regarding impact fees. After the information was provided, MBA did provide or send a letter to the city stating its objections to the use of impact fees as indicated in the information that had been provided. When no response was received, my client initiated this formal process by the filing of a submission on December 19th, 2023, about 13 months ago. So it's been a long haul, ladies and gentlemen, to get this issue before you, and I hope that you take this appeal seriously and listen carefully. The rest of your binder, I'm just going to quickly tell you, have documents identified as exhibits. I'm a lawyer, so that's what I call those sorts of things. Exhibit 1, located at tab 2, is a copy of the request for information that MBA made. Exhibit 2 is the response provided by the city. Now this exhibit is important because, so exhibit 2 is going to be at tab 3. But this exhibit includes 2 important documents for our discussion today. The first is the first complete document. It should be tabbed with a Post-it, and that's the city's needs assessment dated January 2000 that was prepared in anticipation of creating an ordinance permitting the collection of impact fees. The second important document in Exhibit 2 is the last page of the document, and that's the impact fee analysis created by the city and provided to my client pursuant to its information request for the years 2003 to 2023. As you can see in that analysis, if you take a quick look, shows that all the impact fees from 2008 on were allocated to offset future debt levies. The next exhibit, Exhibit 3, is that letter that I was telling you about that MBA submitted to the city on November 18th, 2022, stating that the allocation of impact fees to offset future debt levies was inappropriate because all impact fees must have an intended use when they're created or when the funds are collected, and may only be used for that intended use. The letter goes on to remind the city that the fees must be held in a separate, segregated account. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that this letter was never responded to by the city. No additional information was provided in response to that letter. And that's what led my client to determine that a formal appeal was necessary. The fourth exhibit, tab 5, is a copy of the submission provided to the clerk of the city on December 19th, 2023. Exhibit 5 at tab 6 is a copy of this impact fee statute that we're going to go over pretty carefully, and I'm going to discuss in detail with you. Exhibit 6 is the impact fee ordinance passed by the city of Delafield. The remaining exhibits, 7 and 8, found at tabs 8 and 9, are copies of relevant common council minutes and city administrator budget cover letters. What I'd like to do is start our discussion with the statute. I know you aren't going to be able to see this, but by me pointing to the sections that I'm referring to, I'm hoping it'll be easier for you to find it. So the statute's found in your binder as Exhibit 5, that's at tab 6. In 1993, the Wisconsin legislature enacted Section 66.0617 for the imposition of impact fees. This statute allows Wisconsin municipalities to impose impact fees on new development and building, and also restrict a municipality's ability to impose such fees to the specific process and the specific guidelines as outlined in the statute. If you take a look at Section 2C, it states that a municipality may impose and collect impact fees only under this section. What that means is that the ordinances and the policies followed by the cities must comply with Section 66.0617. The general authority to impose impact fees is stated in Section 2A of the statute that states that a municipality may enact an ordinance under this section that imposes impact fees on developers to pay for the capital costs that are necessary to accommodate land development. Capital costs, in case you're wondering, are defined in the statute. They're the very first section, 1A, in the definition section. That defines capital costs as the capital cost to construct, expand, or improve public facilities, including the cost of land, and including legal, engineering, and design costs to construct, expand, or improve public facilities. What are public facilities? Well, those are also defined in the statute. And I should tell you that the statute is specific about the kinds of facilities that impact fees can be collected for and applied to. Those facilities are limited, as you'll see in 1F, to highways and other transportation facilities, traffic control devices, facilities for collecting and treating sewage, facilities for collecting and treating storm and surface waters, facilities for pumping, storing, and distributing water, parks, playgrounds, and land for athletic fields, solid waste and recycling facilities, fire, law, EMS facilities, and libraries. They don't include facilities owned by schools, and they don't include any other sorts of city facilities, like city halls and community centers. I wanted to point out that in section 2B, that impact fees, when they are set, do need, while this section doesn't prohibit or limit the authority of a municipality to finance public facility by other means authorized by law, the amount of the impact fee imposed by a municipality shall be reduced under 6D to compensate for any other costs of public facilities imposed by the municipality on developers to provide or pay for capital costs. Things like sewer and water, things like roads, those sorts of things. So section 66.0617 sets out the process in section 4 that municipalities have to start with before imposing impact fees. So if we take a look at section 4, sub A tells you that before enacting an ordinance that opposes impact fees, or before amending an ordinance that opposes impact fees by revising the amount of the fee, or altering the public facilities for which impact fees may be imposed, a municipality shall prepare a needs assessment for the public facilities for which it anticipates that impact fees may be imposed. The public facility needs assessment has to include a number of things that are detailed in 1, 2, and 3. And so just so you understand, a needs assessment is a detailed analysis conducted to identify specific public infrastructure improvements that are required due to anticipated new development. The purpose of a needs assessment is to demonstrate that impact fees are being imposed that are directly related to new development. So 4A requires that a needs assessment include an inventory of existing public facilities, including an identification of any existing deficiencies in the quantity or the quality of those public facilities, for which it is anticipated that an impact fee may be imposed. A needs assessment also has to include an identification of new public facilities or improvements or expansions of existing public facilities that will be required because of land development for which it is anticipated that impact fees may be imposed. This identification shall be based on explicitly identified service areas and service standards. A public facilities needs assessment also needs to include a detailed estimate of the capital cost of providing the new public facilities or improvements or expansions to the public facilities identified in subdivision 2, including an estimate of the cumulative effect of all proposed and existing impact fees on the availability of affordable housing in the community. The statute also is detailed not only in the requirement and what's required in a needs assessment, but it also tells you what standards must be used when setting impact fees. And that's found in section 6. Section 6 starts at the bottom of the first page of the statute. Impact fees shall bear a rational relationship to the need for new, expanded, or improved public facilities that are required to serve land development. They may not include amounts for an increase in service capacity greater than the capacity necessary to serve development for which the fee is imposed. They may not exceed the proportionate share of the capital costs that are required to serve land development as compared to the existing use level within the municipality. They shall be based upon actual capital costs or reasonable estimates of capital costs for any new, expanded, or improved public facilities. They have to be reduced to compensate for the other capital costs imposed by the municipality with respect to development, to provide or pay for public facilities, including special assessments, special charges, land dedications, or fees in lieu of land dedication. They need to be reduced to compensate for monies received from the state or federal government. They cannot include amounts necessary to address existing deficiencies in public facilities. And they may not include expenses for operation or maintenance of public facilities. These standards are in line with our U.S. Supreme Court that has actually looked at these issues, and those decisions tell us that such fees must have what they call a substantial nexus between the purpose of the exaction or the fee and the problem or need generated by development. Municipalities have to show that the fees are closely related and proportional to any adverse public impact caused by development, and no more. In Wisconsin, it's an accurate, up-to-date needs assessment that is used as a guideline for meeting these standards. So the statute's clear about how impact fees collected must be used. They must only be spent on capital facilities identified as necessary to serve development in a needs assessment, and must be based on an assessment of the impact development will have on a community's public facility needs. If you take a look at Section 8 of the statute, revenues from impact fees that is imposed, from each impact fee that is imposed, shall be placed in a separate, segregated, interest-bearing account and shall be accounted for separately from the other funds of the municipality. Impact fee revenues and the interest earned on impact fee revenues may only be expended for the particular capital costs for which the impact fee was imposed, unless the fee is refunded under Section 9. Section 9 requires the refund of impact fees and interest if the impact fees are not used within 8 years after they are collected to pay for the capital costs for which they were imposed. The section also requires that those refunds be made to the payor of the fee. Statute, finally, I want to point out that the statute also requires under Section 7R that at the time that the municipality collects an impact fee, it shall provide to the developer from which it was collected or received an accounting of how the fee will be spent. So the impact fee statute is detailed. It tells you what has to be done in order to impose impact fees and what impact fees must be based on. And all the safeguards contained in this statute are designed to make sure that development only pays its fair share and that fees that are paid go towards the accounted for public facilities so that municipalities don't use impact fees as a revenue source. Now that we've gone through the impact fee statute, we should take a look at the city's impact fee ordinance, section 46.4, which was enacted in February of 2000. Now that you know what the statute requires, you're going to see that your ordinance doesn't comply fully with the Wisconsin law. In section B, it requires an annual review to reflect changes in the net capital value of the facilities. So that's not part of the statutory process. I'm sorry, it is section A. Oh, I apologize. The ordinance is located at it's Exhibit 6, so at tab 7. I'll let you catch up. I apologize. I got ahead of myself. And I was talking about section B, all right? And that's where it says that it requires an annual review to reflect changes in the net capital value of the facilities. It's not part of the statutory process, But your ordinance does not require, as the statute requires, that a needs assessment be prepared if the facilities for which the fees are imposed are altered, or if the amount of the fee is amended. The ordinance also doesn't include a provision as required under the statutes that reduces impact fees for other capital costs, which a developer is required to pay when developing in the city of Delafield, which can be a lot, as I mentioned: roads, sewer and water, land dedication. Taking a look at section C, the treatment of impact fee revenues in the ordinance, that section does require that fees be accounted for separately. However, it doesn't contain a provision that requires the fees to be held in a separate, segregated, interest-bearing account. So the city has admittedly failed to maintain these fees according to statute. And I'm assuming that that failure is going to be remedied. That section of the ordinance does correctly require that the fees that are collected may only be spent on capital facilities for which they are collected. If we take a look at section C2, that section does require the refund of fees, but it states that they should be refunded within a reasonable length of time, which if you look further down in the ordinance, the city appears to identify as 10 years in this statute, rather than the statutory time period, which is the current statutory time period of 8 years. This provision also requires a refund to the current property owner, rather than the payor, as is now required by the statute. Delafield's ordinance doesn't require anywhere that developers be provided with an accounting of how the fees paid will be spent as required by the statute. And I've asked some members of MBA whether or not they've received such an accounting, and they have told me that they have not received such accounting. So that also needs to be remedied. The question before us today is, has the city of Delafield complied with Wisconsin law? It appears that it hasn't. First of all, the ordinance needs to be amended to comply with the law. In addition, the city's failed to utilize impact fees collected since 2008 for the capital public facilities identified by the needs assessment as being required to accommodate new development. No impact fee study has been performed since the year 2000 needs assessment. No impact fee study was performed prior to the municipal projects. So allocating fees to the debt service fund to offset future debt levies for these new facilities is inappropriate, because there's never been an assessment made determining what proportion of those buildings, if any, were needed because of new development. The stated application of impact fee funds to future debt payments for these new buildings is simply not in compliance with the statute. There are common council minutes and administrator budget cover letters that are contained in your materials that show that the impact fees that are used to offset future debt levies have been allocated to the undesignated surplus of the city's debt service fund. As I said, since 2008, in amounts over $1 million. In funneling the impact fees to the undesignated surplus part of the debt service fund, the city has failed to segregate these impact fees from the general fund and hold them in a separate interest-bearing account until expended or refunded with interest if not used according to the statute. These fees instead have been commingled with the undesignated surplus of the city's debt service fund. In addition, the debt for this municipal project includes the cost of City Hall, the Community Center, Department of Public Works, and the improvements thereon, none of which are part of the statutory definition of public facilities for which impact fees can be used. So how do we know that the city's failed in its responsibilities? We can take a look at the documents contained in your binder, and the rest of the documents are those that have been compiled by the city or held by the city in their archives. Let's take a look at the needs assessment. The needs assessment is Exhibit 2, so you'll find it at tab 3 in your binder. It should be tabbed with a Post-it. It's the first full document in that exhibit. This assessment was created in 1999. It was dated January of 2000. It's never been amended or updated in any way. And that's important because despite the statement in Mr. Hafner's memorandum prepared for this hearing, stating that there's no specification in the statute when a needs assessment needs to be prepared or updated, the statute actually requires an updated or new needs assessment in the event impact fees amounts are changed, or in the event the public facilities for which impact fees are going to be imposed are altered. It's Metropolitan Builders Association's position that the failure to update the 25-year-old needs assessment is a big failure on the city's part, because the city has failed to have a needs assessment prepared, even though to significantly change the facilities that it's apparently charging impact fees for, and the impact fees have increased since the time of the needs assessment by about 750%. If you look at the study, it identifies only the library, the law enforcement facilities, the then existing fire protection facilities, the then existing park and recreation facilities, and the then existing recycling facilities as the facilities subject to impact fees and part of this study. The needs assessment identifies no improvement being necessary to these then current facilities, and it tells us that there's no debt for these facilities either. I'm going to direct you to page 3 of the study, the section called Study Assumptions. The study assumptions section of the needs assessment clearly states that one of their underlying assumptions is that upon which Delafield's impact fees have been based is that the level of service is going to be the same. That there was never anticipated in this needs assessment that there would be a big municipal project to change facilities, to change the library and the police department and the fire department. In other words, when this assessment was created, there was no intent to improve or expand the service levels or change the public facilities for which impact fees were going to be imposed. I want to direct you to section 2C, which is at the bottom of page 3. And I'm going to read that part because I think it's pretty important for you to hear. This report assumes that the current level of service provided by the city represents the base level service standard for the purpose of establishing public facilities impact fees. To the extent there may be either deficiencies in the current facilities or improvements in the level of service in the future, these upgrades will be financed by increases in property taxes or other sources of revenue such as user fees that will be charged equally to both new and existing development. New development that is subject to public facilities impact fees will not be expected to bear the costs of facilities improvements beyond the level necessary to maintain the current service standard. This means, ladies and gentlemen, that the study was prepared and assumes that if the city was going to require new development to participate in the costs for a higher standard of service or improvements to the facilities that it had in 2000, it would need to amend or revise this needs assessment. The study, or the needs assessment, does identify the excluded facilities in section 2E at the bottom of the page. It excludes the public works structures, the community center, transportation facilities, and the portions of City Hall not associated with fire, law, or library facilities. And it also excludes non-fixed assets like vehicles, mechanicals, and equipment and furnishings from the facilities included under the needs assessment. So based on maintaining the same library, the same law enforcement facility, the same fire facility, the same parks and playground facilities, and the same recycling facility, the study recommended that impact fees be set at $337.63 per single family home. I believe the impact fees are now $2,560 per single family home. An increase of, as I said, if I did the calculation right, about 750%. Given the fact that the population in Delafield has only increased, according to the data that I reviewed, by about 897 people since the needs assessment was prepared, or about 15%, an average of less than 40 people a year, I submit that the significant increase in impact fees doesn't bear a rational relationship to the need for new and expanded or improved public facilities. The needs assessment that the city has relied on for the last 25 years found no need for improvement. It contains no estimate of costs related to any needed improvements or expansions of public facilities necessitated by development. In fact, it states that the city had no plans for improvement to the city's public facilities. It's important, I think, also to recall that according to the statute, the city can't include amounts in impact fees that are necessary to address existing deficiencies in public facilities. I submit to you that a big reason for the new building and all the remodeling was that the buildings were old. They were obsolete. They had existing deficiencies, not because the community was growing at an average of 40 people a year. The new and improved public facilities have not been identified as being necessary because of new development at any time. No portion of the collected fees should have been allocated to those buildings or any debt payments associated with them. That's what the statute tells us. And I did review the Plan B report, that was part of the documentation that the city prepared for tonight. And while it appears to be a well thought out plan, it's not a replacement for a needs assessment, ladies and gentlemen. There's no examination of what need for new construction and the expansion of the facilities was needed and because of new development. In addition, the report includes in its plan construction for the Department of Public Works and City Hall, Common Council chambers, the municipal court, none of which fall under the statute's definition of public facilities. In addition, the Plan B report tells us that the newest part of City Hall was built in 1989. And the oldest part, built, I'm presuming, sometime well prior to that, had to be demolished because it couldn't be brought up to code. The age and condition of the buildings were existing deficiencies that impact fees could not be imposed or collected for. So what should the city have done? They wanted to collect fees for the new buildings and spend the impact fees on the new construction. It should have contracted for a new needs assessment to make a determination what, if any, part of the new buildings were required because of development specifically. City should not have just simply applied the generic 2000 needs assessment formula to calculate the significant increases in the impact fees, and should not have applied the funds collected to offset future debt levies related to these buildings that were not identified in the needs assessment. The next document that I'd like to examine is Exhibit 2, which is the last in Exhibit 2. It's the last document. In that exhibit, it should be tabbed, but it's the very last document. It's the impact fee analysis that was prepared by the city and provided to my client pursuant to my client's information request. Now, this one is really small, so sorry about that. But the impact fee states that since, as you can see, since 2008, well, there was a period between 2008 and 2012 when impact fees weren't allocated anywhere. But since 2008, all the impact fees have been allocated to, quote, offset future debt levies. This analysis shows you how much was collected. Shows how the dates and how much was allocated. Allocation of these extractions to offset debt levies that might be imposed in the future and are not specifically tied to an allowable construction debt for required new facilities is not the statutory purpose of impact fees. The purpose of the fees is simple. The purpose is to help fund the cost of public facilities related to a growing population and which are identified in a needs assessment as being necessary. It's just not what's been done in the city of Delafield. The city's ignored the requirements of the statute. I did include in your binders at Exhibits 7 and 8, so at tabs 8 and 9, we'll start with 8, council minutes that I have obtained from the city's archives, as well as city budget cover letters that I also obtained from the city's archives. And I think that the reason I bring these to your attention is I think that it not only shows where the impact fees went, but that it also shows the intent of the city in respect to impact fees. Excuse me. So if we take a look at Exhibit 7, the first document is a set of minutes from May 20th, 2013. If you turn to page 3 of those minutes and take a look at Section 7, entitled New Business, you can see that there was discussion pertaining to the use of impact fees that had accumulated. It was on this date, May 20th, 2013, that the Common Council decided to use accumulated fees that had not been allocated since 2008 towards future building debt service payments. If you take a look at the minutes, you can see that there are comments pertaining to the fees needing to be refunded, used or refunded. I think if you read the minutes, they clearly show that the tone of that meeting in respect to impact fees was that the city didn't want to lose the impact fees. They did not want to refund them. One council person even suggested that the fees could be applied to anticipated public improvements, as there are projects slated in the future that could benefit from the fees. And this is absolutely contrary to statutory authority. I do believe that at this meeting, council members were provided with a memorandum from Marie Williams, who is the financial officer for the city at the time, and that's included in your materials from the city today. In that memo, I don't have a copy of it in your binder, but was provided to you from the city. Ms. Williams advises that impact fees totaling $247,465 had accumulated since 2007 and had not been spent. She advised that she had obtained an opinion that the fees could be used to offset the municipal building debt. As you can imagine, I do not agree with this opinion. The municipal buildings were not the subject of a needs assessment. They were never determined to be appropriate for application of impact fees. The recommendation in the memo is to allocate the funds to the debt service fund for future payments is also not appropriate. Even if a needs assessment had been completed, such an allocation is simply a method to remove impact fees from the impact fee accounting column into the city's debt service fund column so that the fees wouldn't have to be refunded. That's contrary to statute. Following this decision, the decision to use impact fees towards the future debt payments, you can see by looking at that last page of Exhibit 2, the impact fee analysis, that $274,032.26 were allocated to offset future debt levies. 2 years later, another $364,902.54 were allocated. I can tell you that some next documents we're going to show you that those funds were put into the undesignated surplus account of the debt service fund. The next set of minutes in your binder, which should be marked, are minutes from October 3rd, 2011, 2 years prior to the decision to put the impact fees into the debt service fund. These minutes, if you take a look at page 5, under the new business section, you can see that there was another discussion here regarding impact fees. Ms. Williams here too weighed in, advising that prior to 2010, impact fees had declined. And then they had sharply increased in 2010 with the new buildings. She suggests, according to the minutes, that if the new buildings were not included, the true impact fee would decrease from the then current rates. She goes on to state that if the city decided to leave impact fees as calculated to include the new building's value, then the council would need to amend the ordinance. So clearly, during this meeting, a discussion of whether the fees should have included the new buildings took place. The city decided to move forward with including the new buildings and increasing the fees. There's not an indication that the ordinance was amended as required by statute, and there's no mention in these minutes of a need for a needs assessment or any other statutory requirement other than Ms. Williams advising the council that the fees needed to be kept in a separate account. Advice that we know was ignored 2 years later when the city put the impact fees into the debt service fund, part of the accounting. The next set of minutes, which should be tabbed, is dated May 7th, 2007. If you take a look at page 9 of those minutes, you'll see that impact fees were discussed as they pertained to the 2006 annual audit. One of the discussions pertaining to impact fees was advising the Common Council that the impact fee refund period needed to be changed to comport with a change in the statute. At this time, the city's auditor did caution that the city needed to monitor those fees so that they wouldn't need to refund them. I do find it interesting. One of the reasons why I included this was there's discussion stated in the minutes about using the impact fees for completely inappropriate uses that are contrary to statute, like using them for expenses related to a capital facilities referendum, or for a covered bridge, or equipment, all in an effort to find a place to stick the impact fees, to spend the impact fees so that they didn't have to be refunded. Again, I'll just point out this set of minutes makes no mention of the statutory requirements for the use and collection of impact fees. The last set of minutes I've included in your binder are from February 21st, 2000. The reason I included them was just to be complete. February 21, 2000 was the date on which the Common Council determined to approve the ordinance for the impact fees. There's not a lot of discussion, at least contained in the minutes pertaining to impact fees at that time, but I wanted to include it so that the minutes were complete. So as I look at these minutes and in reviewing them, what struck me during all this time, not only that the council became aware that there was an accumulation of impact fees that they needed to spend or lose, but also that the city council has been setting, collecting, and using impact fees without knowing or understanding what the statutory requirements for those fees are. This is a big reason why we're here. We need you to know what municipalities should be doing in respect to impact fees. Move on to the last exhibit, which is exhibit number 8. So you'll find it under tab 9. These are a collection of budget cover letters from the city administrator, each of which tell us that the impact fee funds have been commingled into the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund. We take a look at the first letter, which is for the 2014 budget. It's dated October 7th, 2003. And we turn to the 5th page. There's a section in that letter pertaining specifically to the debt service levy. Tells us that the fees were added to the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund. It also tells us that at this time the undesignated debt surplus grew to $500,000 with the addition of impact fees. I can tell you that the balance the year prior was $190,000. That budget letter is not included in the bound packet, but I did include it. If you want to look at it to confirm, it is included in the back pocket of your binder as an addition. The 2013 letter confirms in the administrator's own words that impact fees were added to the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund. That portion of the debt service fund that is not specifically allocated to any specific debt. The next budget letter, if you take a look at it, for the 2015 budget, dated October 13, 2014, hoping my assistant tabbed these letters to make it easier for you. But if you take a look at that, this time on it says page 7 on the bottom, but it's, I think, the 4th page of the printed copy. If you take a look at it, at that paragraph, you can see that the current undesignated surplus in the debt service fund is over $1 million. It's doubled in a year. And it states that this includes the addition of impact fees that will be used to pay off existing debt related to the municipal facilities. The fees are being used to level an increase in debt service. So in other words, in order to keep taxes low, not have to increase the debt service mill rate. If you take a look on the next page of this budget letter, the schedule and the chart, you can see that there was no intention of using the impact fees being allocated to the debt service fund dollar for dollar. No, they were, for the most part, being held in the debt service account for potential future use, rather than being kept as required in a segregated impact fee account. The same sentiment is repeated year after year in the budget letters that I've included in here. I'm not going to go through each one because they all pretty much tell you the same, but I'll point you to the last budget letter in your packet. That's for last year's budget, the 2024 budget. The letter dated October 19th, 2023. If you take a look at the third page, again, we see that there is a debt services levy paragraph. And if you read it, at least it seemed to me, that it seems to almost brag about the fact that the debt service, or it does brag about the fact that the debt service mill rate is less than anticipated. It states in part because the city adopted a policy to utilize impact fees from development to decrease the debt service levy. In this paragraph, again, the administrator again confirms that the funds are being added to the undesignated surplus of the general debt service fund, and that the balance of that fund was $642,978 by this time. I did pull the budget letter for this year's budget, and I did include that as an additional document in that back pocket, just to show you that it hasn't changed. The funds are still being funneled into the undesignated portion of the debt service levy, and the surplus has now grown to $740,662. So why do I keep repeating this? I'm sure you're tired of hearing about it. Because placing impact fees into account with the undesignated surplus funds of the debt service fund for the purposes of offsetting some future debt levy is contrary to the Wisconsin statute that requires that they be spent on specific public facilities, and which requires that the fees be held in separate, segregated, interest-bearing accounts until they're spent on the facilities identified in the needs assessment. An allocation of the funds to the debt service column in the accounting books does not equal using the funds, ladies and gentlemen. The way I look at it is it's a tool to kind of manipulate the account so the funds didn't have to be refunded. There was an audit prepared for tonight's meeting that's included in the city's documentation that states in part that, in effect, the impact fees were utilized for the municipal building. In effect doesn't mean that they were being spent appropriately. In any event, the fees should not have been spent on the new construction or the debt for the new construction, as I've repeatedly tried to tell you this evening, because the new construction, the renovations, the new buildings have not been part of a needs assessment, have not been determined necessary for new development. the bottom line is, even if, as the city administrator stated in his memo to the council, that the fees are being used to pay for the debt for the new capital facilities, because those facilities weren't identified in the city's needs assessment and include facilities not included in the statute, they shouldn't have been collected or used. Documentation that we've provided makes it clear that the impact fees are not being specifically allocated to permissible public facilities identified by that old needs assessment. By 2008, the facilities identified in that needs assessment were in the process of being replaced, and now most of them don't exist, or at least have been significantly altered. Ladies and gentlemen, it was not the intent of the statute or the city's ordinance to force new builders to shoulder more than their share of public facility costs. It was the intent of the statute to require a municipality to prepare an analysis of what new development's fair share is and set and apply impact fees accordingly. And if they're not applied that way, then they need to be refunded with interest. So what needs to happen? What is Metropolitan Builders Association looking for? It's looking for the city to follow the law. It's looking for the city to be accountable for the fees that the city has inappropriately collected and used. My client has brought this appeal to bring attention to this important issue, not only for the good of its members, but for the good of the community as a whole, and to make sure that the current Common Council understands what the purpose of impact fees is and how they can be set and collected. MBA wants the city to be aware of the statutory requirements in the setting, collection, and use of fees. They want the city to amend its ordinance to come into compliance with state statute. They want the council to know that its practices, the current practices, violate Section 66.0617 of the Wisconsin statutes. And so that's why we're here. And so how does the city rewind its errors? It's not going to be a simple task. In order to come into compliance, a number of actions need to take place, I think. The first, of course, is amending the ordinance to correct the errors contained in it, such as the refund period, who the refund needs to go to, how impact fees can be amended, the need for needs assessment when changing fees or altering the public facilities, holding funds in a separate segregated interest-bearing account, requiring an accounting of how the fees will be spent, and just to be more specific about the city's responsibilities when setting and using impact fees. In addition, the city needs to reverse the allocation of the impact fees allocated to the undesignated surplus of the debt service fund, or otherwise allocated to offset future debt levies. They need to be placed in an interest-bearing segregated account, and a determination needs to be made as to what interest should be added to those amounts as a result of the failure to hold them in an interest-bearing account. The city needs to determine first what fees so allocated need to be refunded because they've been held for more than 8 years without being appropriately spent per the statutory requirements. This is likely going to include most of the fees collected at least between 2008 and 2016, perhaps some before 2008. But really what the city needs to do to bring its practices to full compliance with the statutory duties is refund all the funds that have been allocated to the debt service fund over the last 16 years. Because the fees that are sitting in that undesignated fund right now legally can't be spent on the facilities that I think the council wants them to be spent on, because none of those facilities were contained in the 2000 needs assessment. The facilities in that assessment don't exist anymore or have been significantly altered. City needs to clear its accounts, start over. In doing so, the city is going to have to determine who the fees should be paid to because the statute has changed over the years. In 2018, the Wisconsin statute changed from providing that refund should go to the homeowners, the current homeowners, to the refund should go to the payor of the fees. So when the city goes through this exercise, I believe it should provide an open and detailed report of the reallocation and the refunds, how they've been calculated, and who's entitled. And I think it's a good idea, just given what's happened, that the city institute a policy that requires the city to provide public reports regarding the collection and the use of impact fees, so that the process is transparent and we don't go down this road again because they can be reviewed. I do realize that this seems like a lot, but it has been going on for a long time, almost 20 years. I believe it's time for the city of Delafield to correct its failures, make things right, be an example for other communities. Show that you're willing to correct your mistakes, the city's mistakes, and make things right. It's time. It's time for things to be put right, and moving forward, it's time to do things right in respect to impact fees. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your consideration of these important issues, and I hope you consider what I've said very carefully. I look forward to learning your decision either here tonight or perhaps coming to the next council meeting to find out and to learn your decision. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Otherwise, thanks for letting me stand up here and speak to you this evening.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely thorough, and you introduced some information and documents we did not have prior, so appreciate you going through all of them so we know what they are. Does anybody have any questions tonight for the presenter?
I got a question. Does the MBA have the average new home cost in 2000 versus 2024 as it pertains to the city of Delafield? Maybe not tonight, but.
Yeah, I
I'd say
don't have
From
it.
the hip, the answer is no.
Yeah, no.
I wouldn't want to mess that one up, but we can definitely get some information for you if you want to know.
Okay.
What that was.
Absolutely.
Jacob, sure.
Okay.
We can certainly take, I don't see expressions on people's faces thinking that we're going to make a decision tonight. But we can certainly compile, send, consolidate questions for you and
Absolutely.
have them go through Tom and Molly. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah,
It's a lot to digest,
Yeah.
I get it. So I appreciate any questions that you do have.
Do you have anything, Tom?
Just one thing for the record, that this letter that's in the MBA document from November 18th of 2022, the city never received that letter. City clerk never received it. I've never seen that letter until Friday, so just want to get that on the record.
Well, that explains a lot. We weren't aware of that.
And I can tell you from a legal perspective, you've been presented tonight with a series of things that have been labeled legal standards and a series of things that have been labeled facts. If the council would like a closed session discussion of the legal elements of this, I'm also willing to set that up, and we can do it in a privileged situation. If it becomes the basis for your decision, you can later discuss that in open session.
That sounds like a good idea. We'll be with you on what might work for that. Okay? All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay warm.
Yeah, you too.
Impossible.
The car doesn't start, we're warm in here. All right. So, quickly moving along, we'll go to item 7. Wait, do I have this right? Consent agenda. There are no items on the consent agenda. So then boards, committees, and commission reports. Licenses. No licenses. Plan commission. Matt is not here, so I can bring this up. We've got a discussion, possible action regarding two parcels, DELC 0798075 and DELC 07980660002, 805 Wells Street. Owner BAL LER Group, 2 LLC. Applicant Tyler Foster, Ware Design Build, and they're requesting approval of a certified survey map to combine several legal lots of record. And this was something that the Plan Commission recommended approval on December 18th. And I don't know, it's the map's in the packet as well, if anyone has any questions on it, but they're moving forward with, they want to move forward with a development there. So just looking for, well, no, I can't make the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Okay, those lots are now, the CSM is approved for those lots. And then item B, ordinance number 839, is ordinance to amend text of Chapter 52, zoning ordinance, and Chapter 10, business of the municipal code, regarding the provisions related to adult-oriented establishments and tobacco shops. This has gone through a couple different discussions at the Plan Commission, and this was recommended for approval on December 18th. This is just bringing some restrictions that are similar to other communities into effect in Delafield on those types of businesses.
I had a question about why the distance is different for the adult establishments versus the tobacco establishments.
It's relative to, again, like I said, we're not trying to blaze a trail. We're mimicking other municipal ordinances that are in Wisconsin in the area, and it's what we came up with based on what was already in place and what other communities have done. Are you looking for
It's a small
Well, I
difference,
mean, like, I didn't understand why we were doing 900 feet for adult establishments and 1,000 feet for tobacco.
Oh, well, there's also a requirement that you can't block out the entire city from either of these.
Okay.
So it can't be unduly restrictive. So that 900 made a difference. Some people were at 500, some people are 1,500. So based on how the maps work, there has to be allowable spaces in a city for these. So does that help? We'd love to make it 10 feet.
Oh,
but
yeah.
They can't.
Okay, I just wanted to know if there was a purpose for it being different versus why wouldn't we have them just be the same?
What was initially proposed wouldn't work.
Okay.
So we had to make it a little narrower.
Less restrictive.
Less restrictive, yeah.
Okay.
I should have said 100,000 feet instead.
I'll make a motion to amend the text of Chapter 52 zoning ordinance and Chapter 10 business of municipal code regarding the provisions related to adult-oriented
You can just say ordinance 839.
Roger that. All right. Ordinance number 839.
Look, so he's moving to approve that. Is there a second?
I second.
Any more discussion? So Mark had the second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay.
I had Dirk on the second.
Or I'm sorry. Dirk had the second.
Second.
Shouldn't affect the vote. Okay, opposed say nay. Abstentions? Okay, motion passes. All right, well, that's it for the Plan Commission. We have a meeting next week, and there's 4 public hearings. Nothing, I don't think earth-shattering, but look them up if you're interested. Okay, Lake Welfare Committee, Alderperson Price.
Yes, we met last Wednesday, fairly quick meeting, but we did have a very interesting discussion on some recent articles that have been published from some studies that have been done on wakeboard damage to a lake. There was one very interesting one just completed in Connecticut on a lake similar to ours, that the phosphorus level in the areas where wakeboards were used increased by 110%. Basically because, it shoots down into the basin, kicks up the bottom of the lake, so a lot of the phosphorus that was buried and gone is now kicking back up into the lake. So this is an issue that just keeps coming up and up and up.
One thing our committee wants to do is put a fairly large sign in the park showing our suggested guidelines on how to safely do this. So we're trying to figure out a way to get that done and up by springtime, so.
Good idea.
Yeah.
All right, is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay. Park and Recreation Committee.
No meeting, no report. Our next meeting is a week from tonight.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Public Works Committee, Dirk.
Yes, the committee met on January 9th, which is not our usual date, but our usual date would have been January 1st, so we had to move it around a little bit. There are a couple actions that we are bringing to the council tonight. You can see those in the attachments. Interestingly, the citizens' comment tonight is closely related to one of them. The intersection at Oneida and Milwaukee is currently, only has a stop sign at Oneida, and the committee, along with the traffic staff, recommends that we put stop signs at both sides of Milwaukee as well to improve the safety in that area. We didn't really discuss the angle parking that was brought up tonight, but the issue of visibility and everything is a significant concern there.
Yeah, I think having a stop there is going to help with exactly what Mr. Zahorik was saying. Is it because of somebody charging around one vehicle to the next, they wouldn't have the opportunity if they knew they were about to have to stop.
Yeah.
Right, so.
I thought maybe he was a plant.
He was not. I have not met the man before. So.
I know him, he's lovely.
Yeah, and also, I mean, 90% of the time, I don't think you need the stop sign. I don't know that the stop signs are necessary, but I've noted too, especially this time of year, coming westbound, the glare is really bad with the headlights, and even just going at 25 miles an hour, and some people are going faster than that, entering that, it's really dark on the street there. So
To help with
stop
the
sign will
speed.
help.
To help with the speed in the city
Yeah,
is another big aspect of it, I
That
know.
was interesting coincidence.
Discussion we had was that stop signs are not supposed to be used as speed control devices. But it seems like whenever we start talking about stop signs, speed comes up as part of the discussion. But this technically is very much warranted based on visibility. And
Happy coincidence.
absolutely, we'll take it.
So, is that something we're acting on?
Sorry?
Yeah, so possible action. Okay.
Yes, it would require action to implement.
Yes. So I would move that we implement an always stop at the intersection of Oneida and Milwaukee streets.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, or abstentions? Okay, we've got 2 new stop signs. I'm sure
Awesome.
the crowd is excited about that.
And the second item that I bring to the council tonight is a request to remove the parking restriction on the south side of Church Street. Church Street has been widened, and the parking restriction, based on what everybody says, is really kind of an obsolete item. And so we want to take out that restriction. The current restriction is that you can only park there on Sunday mornings. And in practice, that probably isn't real. It's not enforced, and the police department is totally in agreement that we don't need that parking restriction anymore. So I move that we remove the parking restriction on the south side of Church Street.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Okay, well,
Okay.
so now we can park there.
And then with that, we need to update the traffic map. So I move that we update the traffic map for the city to reflect the changes we've just approved.
I'll second.
Got it. I'll call Danielle. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Or abstentions? All right. Yeah. It was pretty close, unless Jacob cares.
I don't care.
Okay. Danielle's on the record. All right.
Nothing more to report.
Next, okay, thank you. Next, Delhart Commission, we have not had a meeting since our last meeting, so no report. Police Commission.
No meeting, no report.
All right. Library Board.
Yeah, we met last week. Couple things to note. There's the director's report in your packet. The Culver, we are now moving to Culver's Night every month. So it's the last Tuesday of every month in Wales. So it's going to be consistently at Culver's. That seems to be the best option for everyone. And if you want to volunteer, the Friends of the Library is looking for volunteers to help run that too. And then the Foster Found trivia, virtual trivia is running through February 14th. So fun online stuff for the library.
All right, thanks, Danielle. Zoning Board of Appeals.
No meeting, no
All
report.
right, well, you missed the one. All right, Promotional and Tourism Commission, Alderperson Valdey.
Well, the tourism meeting is scheduled for the 28th. We had to reschedule due to the lack of a quorum. We are going to overview the 2025 marketing projects and timelines with Z2. The Delafield Tourism is investing around $125,000 in promoting the city of Delafield and our hotels and amenities during the year 2025. We're also welcoming a new director of promotion and tourism, and we are very excited to welcome Jory Hartwig to start February 17th for training. It's the end of my report.
All right, thanks, Jackie. Lake Country Fire and Rescue Commission, I don't believe there was a meeting. Lake Country Fire and Rescue Board, was there a meeting? I think there was a meeting. So I know Matt's not here, but they did meet last week, and they went over an audit, and so that's Matt. I'm sure will have plenty to say about it when he gets back. Let's see, Deer Management Committee.
No meeting, no report. Next meeting is going to be in February.
Derek, can I just ask a question? I've been talking with a number of cities on projects, and one of the meetings I had with our friends on Pine Lake is he happened to mention to me that their sharpshooters took out 125 deer this year. Is that something that we do, have done in the past, or we consider in the future?
We've
That
done
seems
it
to
in
work
the
pretty
past.
well.
It's expensive.
It's very expensive?
Yeah,
It's about $200 a deer the last time we did it.
Whoa, they spent some money on that. Wow.
yeah,
That's 20 grand.
There's a limited pool of those people that are certified to do it, and they're not, they're in it for the sport, but they're also in it for the money.
Okay, that's
And the
interesting.
committee's annual budget is $3,000, so that wouldn't take out.
It'd be something to bring up at budget time, because I know.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other committees, commissions, and boards, none. Unfinished business, we do not have any. Mayor's report. Somehow I lost some of my ideas over our presentation prior. Let's see. Well, we had Delafreeze, which was neat to see all the ice sculptures. We actually had decent weather, and they're still up because last year I think they're up for about 45 minutes. And a couple events coming up. We've got the 98th annual McNulty Coon Feed at the American Legion this Saturday at 4:30. So get there early because it goes quick. And also there's an ice fishing jamboree coming up, I think first Friday and first weekend in February. So a couple, we're even though it's cold, the city still runs, and we have our events. Also, looking at, if January's not a popular month for new employees to come on board, we've got a couple that are just newbies, but the one of note is Deb Smith has got her 9th, I think, anniversary, and she's about to, even though she's been with the city associated for much longer, but she's retiring.
17 years, yeah. It was a combination, promotion and tourism and
but
chamber.
That's one of our 5 years or more that's on the chart this month, but plenty more next month. All right, new business, item 11, approval of vouchers payable report. So pay the bills. Anyone want to approve the voucher
Make a
list?
motion to approve the voucher payable report.
A second?
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, or abstentions? Okay, voucher list is approved. Report of city officials. City administrator.
Yeah, just two things this evening. First of all, I just want to mention that we did have that operational planning and local official meeting for the Highway C bridge in the future, which is scheduled to be under construction as early as 2029, so it's a little ways off yet. The PowerPoint presentation from that meeting is in your packet, so please take a look at that and let me know if you have any questions on it. Probably the biggest thing that came out of it, at least from my perspective, is DOT staff is planning on putting sidewalks on both sides of the bridge. Another staffer questioned whether that's appropriate and whether the city would have to pay for the second side because there's only one side currently. And so that was kind of left unresolved. But big picture, I don't know that the city really cares all that much about a sidewalk on the west side. It seems like a sidewalk on the east side would be more than adequate. And then both sides will have a 5-foot bike lane in addition to the sidewalk.
Quick, I have a question on it. Should have asked it right after the meeting when it was fresh, but they mentioned that now it's I don't know if it's a 2 or 3-span bridge, or they said they're going to a 2-span bridge in the report. Do you know what that means? I think it was early on in the presentation, but I'm assuming that's the number of supports that are down below it. My question, I guess, to follow up with that group is, does that enable 4 lanes, another lane of traffic on each side for if Highway I-94 gets expanded to 3 lanes?
Yes, it is being built such that that will be, will work with this bridge.
Okay, then I don't care how many spans it is, as long as that's in, okay. All right.
Tom, I had a question. In the presentation, they talked about basically making 2 lanes in each direction on the bridge to accommodate left turn lanes in both directions. Right now, we just have 2 lanes, right? So that'll be a widening of that bridge?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that'll allow a through lane in addition to the people wanting to turn left onto the ramps. And then the other thing, and Alderperson Valdy already hit on this, is the hiring of our new Executive Director of Promotion and Tourism, Jory Hartwig. Looking forward to having her on board. And with her start date on February 17th, that will allow her to work together with Deb Smith for a couple of weeks before Deb retires. So she'll get the opportunity to train and shadow under Deb, which is great. So looking forward to welcoming Jory.
All right, thanks, Tom. Molly, City Clerk report.
So just an election update on this. There will be 2 elections coming this spring. The first one will be on February 18th, which is a spring primary for the state superintendent race. That is the only race that will be on the ballot. I do not expect a huge turnout for that. The Supreme Court 2 years ago was 30%, so I don't really expect this to exceed that much. And then on April 1st, we do have the spring election. On there, you'll see the aldermanic seats for 1, 3, 5, and 7, school district seats, and some other regional and state races. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, Molly. City Treasurer, no report. Council requests for future agenda items. Do we have any tonight? If not, email Tom and Molly if you'd like anything added. Correspondence, okay, so then from there, announcement of matters for possible closed session. Council will convene an open session after the completion of the closed session to consider the balance of the agenda. So looking for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the following provisions. Pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, more specifically regarding goal setting for performance evaluation with the city administrator / director of public works. Someone like to make a motion to go into closed session?
I would so move.
Second.
Dirk and Danielle. Okay, roll call poll.
Alderperson Henry?
Aye.
Alderperson Schaefer?
Aye.
Alderperson Valdy?
Aye.
Alderperson Wilkin?
Aye.
Alderperson Price?
Aye.
Alderperson Burke?
Aye.
All right, we are now in closed session. Okay, we're now back I'm looking for a motion to reconvene into open session.
So moved.
Second?
And was that Dirk with the second? Oh, Mark. I was looking down.
Do we look that much alike?
And that is at 9:12 PM. Okay, Henry,
Aye.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Baldy,
Aye.
Wilkin,
Aye.
Price, Berg.
Aye.
Okay, we're now in open session. Seeing no other items on our agenda, our meeting is now closed at 9:13 PM. Thank you.